Hello, my dear friends. You're visiting me again, which means that something here, what happens on this channel in these videos, is valuable and important to you. I hope it will stay that way, and today we'll try to move forward on another very important topic, which may go beyond its title and turn out to be much broader. How can we learn to enjoy the simple things? This really is a very important thing. Have you ever noticed that everything in life seems to be going well, everything is working out, you're satisfied with your life, but somehow there's no real joy? Well, it's a familiar situation, isn't it? If this sounds familiar to you, stay until the end, and maybe you'll feel much deeper than you have until now. So, remember that joke where two grown men meet and one says to the other, "Can you imagine?" People have become so cynical that now they're even faking Christmas tree ornaments, faking them. He says, "How is that possible? Christmas tree ornaments." So he asks, "How?" "I go to the store, buy Christmas tree ornaments, put them in my hand, look at them, and there's no joy." And we often live like that. Why does this happen? The primary and most significant difficulty that we consistently encounter, which is absolutely fundamental and truly key to the very essence of our lives, is the prevailing condition for our joy. Since our lives are built around concepts, these concepts start calling us to have our desires fulfilled. And they stop us or scare us with the prospect that our desires, on the contrary, might not be fulfilled. This, of course, is a big problem. And then, if everything goes the way we want, we experience a situational feeling that resembles joy. Why do I say it only resembles joy? Because in reality, there is no pure joy there. In this feeling, as a rule, there is some concept of joy. This often happens when we strongly strive for something. We tend to turn something important, alive, and valuable into a concept. For example, joy becomes a concept of joy, and happiness becomes a concept of happiness. If your happiness has conditions, then you are doomed to be an unhappy person, sometimes experiencing happiness, and at other times simply being in horror, fear, sadness, and almost on the verge of depression. Love as well, which is greatly overvalued as a concept in our culture, is often faked. Love camouflages itself as the concept of love and turns into its surrogate when, against the backdrop of this very love, a lot of conditions are imposed on other people. Like, "I will love you, but only under this condition, and if not, then I won't love you." Or, "I will love you fine, but you have to change." Or something like that. We always have conditions. Yeah, that's just how it is. Millions of people now sitting in the lotus position in their rooms, apartments, or in Buddhist monasteries or ashrams, Indian ones have long since turned. Enlightenment, self-realization, awakening into the concept of enlightenment, self-realization, or awakening. And it's not the fault of these people, but rather a misfortune, our misfortune. Why? The problem is that concepts have taken over, and it turns out there are a lot of conditions within these concepts. Conditions that can make us happy or unhappy. We have always thought, and surely many of us still think, that joy is a consequence of some event. But that's exactly how it appears in our experience, isn't it? You get a birthday present and you feel happy and you say, "Oh, how wonderful, I have this gift." You get a raise, you've wanted a salary increase for a long time, your employer calls you in and says, "Well, Mikhail, you're doing a good job, here's a raise for you." And you will certainly feel truly happy, you will feel deeply appreciated. But if, for example, you were given something that you truly did not want, or if you proposed to a wonderful girl and she unfortunately turned you down, or perhaps your employer did not value you in the way that you had always wanted, you would then feel absolutely anything but joy. Depending on how you deal with this frustration, you might feel fear, sadness, resentment, anger, intense rage, or fear that happiness may never happen in your life, and so on and so forth. In other words, our joy is always conditional. That's always how it is in our experience. Events happen and we experience emotions. But that's just a reaction, my friends. The only freedom we truly have is the freedom not to be a reaction. And so the moment we accept as a rule or an axiom that joy is a condition of events, we become hostages. hostages to what we no longer control? Well, for example, our life just goes on its own course. No matter what you think, you are not in control. So tell me, the events in your life, the ones that happen, could you have predicted them? For most events, you honestly admit that no, you couldn't have predicted them at all. For some other events, you have the illusion that yes, maybe in hindsight you could have. You could have predicted that. Or for example, you set goals and achieved them. Look at me, I did great. But even here, you weren't actually in control of anything. It's just that some of your expectations come true and some don't, and that's how it will always be. The only problem is that if you are happy only because some events turn out the way you want, then you depend on how lucky you are in this regard. How lucky you are in this casino. In reality, you don't control anything in life. But you do have a very important freedom. I call it the freedom that shows itself when you stop being just a reaction. You can even... What is the difference between real joy and its substitutes, conceptual surrogates? Joy. After a while, the joy fades and hunger returns again. You need more, something else. It's like you spent half your life dreaming of a big, beautiful car, saving up money for it. Then you buy it, you feel joy, you drive it for a week or two, and suddenly the joy is gone. That's it, the anxiety is back again. And in this sense, joy is just a temporary relief from tension. You know, when life matches your expectations, it feels like the tension eases a bit. Phew. But true joy, it stays with you inside always. What is the nature of true joy, my friends? Let me say it straight. Here's what I want to get across to you. Joy is the measure of God in your life. Replace it with presence and nothing will change. Joy is the measure of presence in your life. Events are just the form in which presence manifests. And joy is not directly tied to the event itself. I want you to feel this. I'll try to give you a few illustrative and practical examples so you can truly discover and fully appreciate joy as your own inherent and personal attribute. What do I mean when I say that joy is the measure of presence in your life? Joy is the quality through which presence manifests itself in contact with you. Joy arises at the moment when presence reclaims its rights. Joy arises at the moment when God returns to your life. And this is very important. What does this look like, friends? Joy manifests as a consequence of presence. It accompanies presence in your life. Now, please recall situations when you truly wholeheartedly felt joy. Most likely you will notice those signs within yourself. And the description that I give from video to video as presence, isn't that right? You are totally, completely immersed in this situation right now. And then it doesn't matter what kind of event you encounter, whether it's a minor event or a major one. An event that triggers reactions in you, such as delight, inspiration, or even sadness. And in both cases, strangely enough, there can be joy. Can you imagine? I can give you several examples because many of you are probably thinking of some right now. Examples of a tragic nature. But what about people who find themselves in a difficult life situation? Those who are going through a severe crisis? An existential, social, or family crisis? And what about people who are experiencing loss? Loss of a job, loss of attachment, loss of relationships? And how do you cope with people who have fallen ill? And what about people who have faced any other tragic life situations? Who have trauma upon trauma? Or who are currently living in inhuman conditions? These are truly important arguments. But if these arguments become ultimate for you, you are once again stuck inside the concept, you are doomed to be unhappy. At best, you will view the catastrophes happening in life as some kind of lesson you need to learn. And then, intellectually, within the same concept that created them, you will try to solve this puzzle. And you won't succeed. You will continue to remain unhappy. You will be doomed to suffer. I could describe hundreds to you. Well, in this video, I won't describe hundreds of situations, but I could describe hundreds of situations from working with my clients, when the conversation is heart to heart, eye to eye, well, most importantly, heart to heart. And pain is accompanied by joy. Why does this happen? Precisely for the reason I just described. Let's try. Try this for yourself. You don't need to believe me. As I say in many videos, don't believe a single word I say. Discover it for yourself. If it has any meaning for you, that's wonderful. But you don't need to believe me. I don't need anyone to believe me. I don't need anyone to follow me. I don't need to convince you of any idea. I'm just walking around your life with a flashlight, occasionally highlighting something with these videos. Whether you look there or not is up to you. Do this for yourself. Remember situations where you felt, I don't know, sad? Or situations that are relevant right now where you experience, I don't know, some feelings that we call toxic. What are toxic feelings? These are feelings we've identified with and gotten stuck in. For example, there's shame, which actually has important creative purposes. It should show us whether we're on the right path, whether we're betraying ourselves, whether we're deceiving others, and whether we're living up to our values and our self-image. But there's also toxic shame, which always stays with you. If you know what that's like, then you surely know what it means to struggle with shame. And then that very paradox happens. When certain events occur, we feel no joy, even though we want to feel joy. And we try to overcome this event in order to earn our right to a dose of joy. But in reality, it's just a surrogate, a kind of conceptual joy that's like a drug. That's it. So what happens then? Not only is the absence of joy already a result of fighting with yourself, because you have banished presence from your life. Well, as if you had banished it. You can't banish God from your life. No way. But you can convince yourself that He isn't there, or that presence or God isn't there. And now you start fighting with the situation for your right to joy as well. You see, it's a complete dead end. I remember I had a very difficult period in my life related to my health, and it was connected to fear, anxiety, and sadness. I was on the verge of depression. I realized that I didn't know how to feel joy at all. And for me, it was a really hard decision to go on a vacation away from home, which we had planned in advance, even before these health problems started. And during that vacation, it was quite hard for me. It was a difficult period in my life. I watched my middle daughter Milana, who, like all children, knows how to be genuinely happy. Wow, Dad, she would run up to me and tell me something. I thought, how does she manage to be so joyful? So I thought, why don't I try to do the same? I remember that at one time William James, one of the founding fathers of psychology, had this idea that everyone thinks feelings follow events. But in reality, the event determines the feeling. He says, well, imagine a ship captain who is very afraid, but when he goes out on deck, he pretends not to be scared. And the fear immediately goes away. This really works both ways. If you want to manage the concept, it works both ways. So I tried to do that myself. I tried to copy my daughter and also tried to enjoy the simple things in life that came up during this vacation. And you know, I got really tired, because I was trying to approach joy not from the place where it actually is. So where is it really? 2 steps back. So imagine a situation where you feel fear or sadness, maybe even pain. Of course, in our lives there are events that are very unpleasant, associated with loss, grief, disasters, or trauma. And our reactions to them, pain, fear, sadness, resentment, guilt, shame, they turn out to be natural. These feelings themselves, which accompany events, are natural. What is unnatural is identifying with them. That is, if you try to cling to them and consider them as yourself, you end up with major problems. These are truly enormous problems that throughout your life will they continue to torment you. Now, try to stay in this story and find someone you could tell about it. If you know people who are capable of being present, people with a big open heart, you know that they won't try to save you, comfort you, fuss over you, or give you a bunch of advice. They will simply be present with you as you tell them about it. Try telling them how hard it is for you to experience this shame. And your main task here, the only one, is not to compromise with concepts, but to remain present. What does it mean to be present? I describe this a lot in my videos, but the best way to express it is with this word, or rather this phrase, I am. You can doubt anything, your intentions, your goals, even your feelings and thoughts, not to mention your positions and values, your worldview and the ideas you have. But you cannot doubt that I am, that you are. Something inside you knows this. You can plug your ears, cover your eyes, hide under a pillow, submerge yourself in a flotation tank, find yourself in total sensory deprivation, but something inside you knows that you exist. And this I am is the very source of presence. Now try to notice that against the background of this I am, you can engage in some kind of activity. Any activity, simple or routine. But in this case, within this I am, you are telling another person about yourself personally, directly to them. And stay with that. Notice only this. Pay attention only to what is present and what is happening. And then you will find that against the background of your story, sooner or later, any practicing therapist who works deeper than just catharsis, unfortunately, quite a few therapists believe that simply being aware of feelings and expressing them freely is the final point, the final station of therapy. No, that's not the case. That's only the beginning of therapy. This is the most difficult place. A therapist's true qualification only begins here. And from any perspective, whether you are the therapist or the client, you may notice that as soon as a person who is experiencing pain, fear, or shame remains for some time, for a more or less extended period, in presence, sooner or later, against the backdrop of this feeling. I don't want to compete with this feeling, but you will see its nature. Joy begins to appear, and sometimes even gratitude. Joy and gratitude are attributes of presence. They are the emotional form that presence takes. The emotional form in which presence reveals itself. This is how presence breathes, and then you will encounter not the concept of joy, but true, deep, genuine joy. Why does this happen? Because in fact, within your toxic feeling that you are experiencing right now, a huge portion of vitality, of presence, is held hostage. But how is it imprisoned? It's as if it's locked up, like air compressed in a cylinder with some kind of gas. And when this feeling comes into presence, the walls of the concept begin to dissolve, and energy is released. This energy manifests, just as God manifests in our lives, through joy, gratitude, and love. I think He can manifest in any way, of course, but this triad, love, not the concept of love, but love where there are no more conditions and no longer an object or subject. Gratitude that no longer depends on the reactions of others. You are grateful simply for yourself, because your nature is gratitude. You don't need anything else. You don't need validation, whether your gratitude is accepted or not, and joy, and it is in no way tied to events. And against the backdrop of this toxic shame, you'll notice a certain embarrassment appears, like the old shades of shame, and then joy, gratitude, warmth, or love arise. And this happens everywhere, as soon as the concept is destroyed. Why does this happen? Imagine a concept or a toxic feeling, a reaction in the form of, say, a snowball. You pack the snow tightly and throw it into a lake or, for example, into the ocean. And the snowball just returns to the ocean. It dissolves. That's exactly what happens with any toxic processes. And as a result, the released energy that from this deconstruction, it manifests as a kind of byproduct, so to speak, in the form of joy, gratitude, and love. In reality, what you're dealing with here is presence. In fact, this is how presence breathes you, nothing more, nothing less. That's what it means to rejoice. You can't fake joy. Well, technically you can, but nothing good will come of it. But you can truly be joy itself. All you really need to do is simply to exist and be present in the moment. Not to be this or that, one way or another, but just to be. And then you'll notice that joy, it never left. And whatever you do, even the simplest things in life, just stroking your son's back, who, like mine yesterday, scored 8 goals. He plays football at the Paris Saint-Germain club. The name sounds fancy, but here it's more about the pleasure you get from how much you can enjoy simple things. Whether you're talking with your daughter, hugging her as she lies on your right shoulder, or chatting with your wife. Whether you're chopping carrots or opening a coconut with a little hatchet. Still, whether you're talking to other people on the other side of the screen, joy is your own quality and no one can take it away from you. You can choose to give up the nature of joy by banishing God from your life. Since the time of Adam and Eve, we just can't seem to stop. We keep banishing God from our lives. But He is patient. He doesn't go anywhere. We think that we've turned away from Him. We've even made up a story for ourselves that it was He who cast us out. But in reality, we betray the nature of His presence within us every day, every minute. As soon as we wake up in the morning, as we awaken from sleep, we immediately fall into another kind of sleep. Right away, this I, the personality, rushes in and starts commenting on everything. Everything's fine. What's my mood today? Good. What are my plans for today? In which of these dreams were we real? Nowhere. It's in this very moment that I just described, when you look into another person's eyes and from heart to heart, speak to them about yourself. That is the only place where God lives. In 2013, I wrote a book. You can read it. It's a philosophical, academic book on psychotherapy. Psychotherapy as a path to the formation and transformation of reality. In it, I wrote the following: God lives in contact. We think that we pray to God, but in reality, God lives in the prayer itself. That is, if He truly lives in it, because prayer can also be conceptual. How many times have I seen situations where people enter a huge church and, moving clockwise or counterclockwise, walk around all the icons, kiss them, and then leave with an indifferent look? That's it. They've completed their morning, afternoon, or evening ritual for the day. But was He really there? Did the person allow God to be near them or not? At all. You understand, right? And that's why psychotherapy is a kind of prayer, if you will. Because not doing psychotherapy, just talking with your husband, with your children, God is there. You don't have to go to church. Well, I'm not discouraging you from going to church. If you are a deeply religious person, by all means go, please. But God never went anywhere. He is right here. Your prayer can be anywhere. In your daily work, in meeting with other people, that is your prayer. Be happy, my dear ones. I hope I managed to touch something inside you. Try it. Try it and you'll discover that joy has always been within you, just like gratitude and love. You don't need to look for love, you are already love. You don't need to look for joy, you are already joy. You don't need to look for gratitude because you are already gratitude. Paradoxically, our parents teach us to say thank you, while we ourselves are the embodiment of gratitude. Parents teach us about love, but we ourselves are the embodiment of love. Can you see how absurd it is? That's why your task is not to learn this, but to return to yourself. If I manage to make my modest contribution to this process, I need nothing more. Thank you, my dear ones, for your attention. If you think this video might be useful for your friends and acquaintances, don't hesitate to share it. But if you want to join our programs as usual, I'll leave the links here. Perhaps you would like me and our large academy team to help you discover your true nature, presence, and your path, which can become deeper and more interesting with each passing day. Take advantage of this opportunity if you are ready and have matured at this moment. If not, I'll see you in new videos. See you soon. Bye.